Thanks so much, Dan.
All right, Patrick. And again, if you see a particular question in our pause and you want to ask that, do so, because I may misglancing at the question.
No problem. Yeah, I'll pop up on screen if I need to, for sure.
Sounds good. All right. Well, look, it's honored for me to be here speaking before the Ibogaine conference, and appreciate Microdoses presenting this program and inviting me on to speak. I'm the pharmacist. I'm from the United States. I live in the New Orleans area. I came from a small town called St. Bernard Parish, we call it. And the Netflix docuseries, The Pharmacist, which many people have seen. In this keynote, I won't be able to address too much of the story. I suggest you go to Netflix and watch it. I may touch on pieces of it. But in any event, the show has been shown shown to 100 million people. And I get a lot of comments from people in Canada. I got a lot of comments from people in Australia. I got comments all over the country. I'm supposed to speak in Australia next year at their Pharmacist Association. And I'm going to speak at the American Pharmaceutical Association's meeting in about 3 weeks in March. So anyway, enough of that salesmanship. I am president of Tunnel of Hope. The Tunnel of Hope comes from a theme that when I was doing a lot of my work in advocacy, trying to shut down a pill mill doctor and trying to educate to reduce the drug problem way back 15 and 20 years ago, I would ride to work through a tunnel of oak trees that they had on a 2-lane highway, and it formed this tunnel. And I used to, when I would go through this tunnel, I would pray, what can I do to reduce the opiate and addiction problem? Okay, so it's been my theme, and my website is tunnelofhope.org. And what I'm doing is, let me tell you why I'm doing it, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing. Okay, back in 2005, I know that's a while back. Okay, I had already shut down a pill mill doctor. First, I solved my son's murder, which I then went on a mission, and I had promised God that if I could solve his murder, because of stigma, the police wasn't working on his murder because it was a drug-related murder. And then the police were treating him like a criminal, just because he used drugs, okay, and then he got shot to death. So I had to do the investigation. Long story short, I solved it, and I had made an agreement with God that I would go on a mission to try to reduce these tragedies, educate parents and kids and whatnot. Well, shortly after that, I'm a pharmacist inside my drugstore. I'm starting to see a lot of OxyContin prescriptions. This is way back in the year 2000, okay. Long story short, there's a pill mill doctor that's operating, and I try to get the authorities to shut it down, and they don't shut it down. So I have a 1.5-year investigation. I develop modes that go into our office. I videotape our office at night. I do everything I can to yell and shout, and I eventually am responsible for shutting her down, which is why it's kind of been made into a documentary. And also, I went on to go after Purdue Pharma, okay, which leads me back to I eventually was doing some advocacy trying to influence politicians. I started realizing I was working in little town halls, I was working in schools, and people have to do that. And I did some of that, okay? But I thought bigger. You know, I want to have a bigger impact. Maybe even a distant dream would be a national impact, okay? And so I went initially to politicians locally. And one thing about losing your son to addiction, you know, our stories are important, okay? They do get us in the door. People usually pay attention to us. So I got in with one of the senators in my state, okay? And I talked to him about, look, you know, this OxyContin has been killing people for a long time. We can't do anything about this company, Purdue Pharma, okay? I said, why don't we at least tax the opioids? If we tax the opioids, we can turn around and use those dollars, okay, for treatment and education. You know, I mean, the damage that they have created by that product, they should have some responsibility. Well, the senator agreed. Okay, he said, I'm going to work on that. And me usually being naive, like thinking the cops were going to solve my son's murder. I thought the cops were going to put the bad doctor out of business. Well, I kind of think this senator's really going to do what he's going to do. A couple of months go by and nothing's happening. I try to get back with the senator. I can't, but I do get with his first assistant. And his first assistant meets with me, and I sit down, and I'm all revved up. I'm saying, what's happening? I mean, what's he doing? And he starts giving me what I call a yeah. He says, these things take time, and there's a lot of politics involved, and, you got to have some patience. You got small bites at the apple. And then I get a phone call right when I'm sitting in his office. And I don't hear too well, okay? So I have my phone on speaker, and it's my drugstore calling, because I'm still working at the drugstore back then. And they're calling and they're telling me that one of our patients, customers, but also a personal friend, okay, overdosed and died. Well, he hears this, and you can see his tone sort of changes. Well, Dan, look, man, I see what you're going through. You live in this day to day. I understand your passion. I appreciate it. But then let me tell you, the problem is not enough people are dying. And when he said that shocked me. That hurt me. Okay. Number one, in my little town of about 50,000 people, we had lost in 1 year 30 overdose deaths. Now, in fairness, though, back then, this is 20 years ago, the CDC that keeps track of this, only 10 of those reported as overdose deaths. Because back then, stigma was so bad, parents would not admit their kids died by overdose. But I knew better. I was in touch with the police and the EMTs and the firefighters. People were listening to me, but to really, really create action, I needed something. I thought to myself, if I had a big following, I had tried to build a little following in my parish, and I think I wound up getting maybe about 20 people interested, okay? And I said, but if I had a big group of people following me, okay, something like the NRA has, the NRA over here in the United States, National Rifle Association, they have millions of followers, and they pretty much can pressure these politicians into getting what they want. So I thought to myself, boy, I wish I could come back at this guy right now and say, you know what you just said, your senator's going to get thousands of emails tomorrow. His phones are going to be ringing tomorrow, okay? In fact, some of us are going to go to the TV stations, and that quote that you just said, not enough people dying, is going to happen. Well, again, that taught me you need something to influence politicians. And there's a couple of things that influence politicians, okay? One is if it affects their election. That's the biggest, okay? Now, they'd like you to be able to give them money, okay? That can influence that. Of course, most of the time money is for their campaign, so that's influencing. And I don't want to give them money, okay? But what you can do is if you have a large number of people that are on your side, okay, you can let them know that if we don't get what we need, okay, it could affect your election. I got 1 million followers, okay? It could affect your election. Second thing that they don't like is they don't like to be embarrassed or shamed, okay? So the truth is, if you got a big following, okay, you send in letters, you get people to write op-eds in the newspaper, you call a local TV station and say, look, kids are dying. We need this treatment, okay? And all of a sudden you start shaming them. Okay, I did that a little bit when I solved my son's murder. I did that a little bit when I solved shutting down a pill mill. Okay, and so I realized that's what you need. So in any event, as time goes by, that's 2005. Well, Katrina happens, which is the big hurricane down in Louisiana where I live. Okay, it kind of put me in a rebuild my life mode for a number of years. And then I went back into advocacy again, but I was kind of spinning my wheels. I wasn't really accomplishing as much as I had done the first 5 or 10 years after my son's death. I was involved in developing a pharmacy monitoring program. We had a pain clinic moratorium. We educated in the schools. There's a whole bunch of things we did, okay? Of course, I also thought I really haven't moved the needle. People had told me that, and I couldn't deny it, okay? Yeah, I had an effect. I bet I saved some lives, but I didn't really move the needle. It's been getting worse. Okay. Well, in any event, I then at 65, my wife says, look, you got to stop all this investigation and all this stuff. You did a good job, but look, we got our first grandchild, please retire. So bingo, I actually did retire. Well, 2 years later, a guy comes up, contacts me, and he's with my local newspaper, which is a big newspaper in New Orleans. It has a pretty big circulation. And he's got to write a story on the origins of the opiate situation. And he discovers that the little town, a suburb of New Orleans, where I came from and where I did all my advocacy, he discovers that that town back in the year 2000 was one of the first places in the country that reported the OxyContin overdoses, and that the OxyContin was a killer. Okay, and so he went back to our little town. Now I'm retired. I live about an hour away now from that town. He goes into that town and starts asking them questions. They all say, you got to speak to this guy, Dan Schneider, the pharmacist. He did a whole bunch of work back then on that thing. He looks me up. He writes this big story, an 8-page story, leaflet in the newspaper. It goes out and it just explodes. It does real, real well. People contact me from California and from New York and whatnot. They want to talk about either a movie or a documentary. They want to go further with the story. Okay, and there were things I did with Purdue also that I just can't elaborate on all the things that I did. Okay, so it was a big, big story of a lot of different parts. You know, there was my son's murder, there was the pill mill doctor out of business, all my advocacy, all my efforts against Purdue, all my efforts to try to get in touch with politicians. And so it gets big, and this company from New York, Cinnabon, they decide to create a sizzle reel. All right, they invested in a sizzle reel about my story, and they go about trying to sell it to Amazon and Netflix and such. Well, history shows now Netflix picked it up, paid for it, okay, and they distributed it. And it's now been seen by 100 million people in 62 countries. They tell me there are places where it actually is subtitles, if you can't understand the language, which I'd have to see that. That's got to be crazy. But any event, now, remember, I've been retired for a while now. I retired when I was 65. This Netflix thing came out a year ago, so I'm still like almost 69 years old when it comes out. And I'm still sort of retired. I knew it was a big story, but I didn't know it would get this big. All of a sudden, I started to get comments from around the world, plenty from Canada, by the way, okay, but United States and all around the world, and they all say, look, we need somebody like you to help lead, okay, we really do. We admire what you do. You got tenacity, you got fortitude and all this kind of stuff, and this problem's getting worse. We really need you to lead, okay, and then one morning I got a phone call, and I didn't realize how big my platform was. But I got a phone call, and it was a secretary called and said, Mr. Botticelli would like to speak to you. And I'm thinking to myself, who the hell is Mr. Botticelli? I'm thinking maybe he's an Italian opera singer, Botticelli, okay? Well, in any event, the secretary puts me on the phone with him, and he starts rambling, oh, Dan, it's incredible what you did, and we need somebody like you, and I want to get together with you and see what we can do to reduce this problem. And I say, well, you know, like who are you? Okay, I didn't say it that way, but he picks up that other one. He says, no, I'm Michael Botticelli. He says, I was Obama's drug czar. And all of a sudden I say, God dang, you know, before this docuseries, if I would have tried to talk to Michael Botticelli, I couldn't have got past this. Now he's calling me. Well, all that is this, you know, notoriety and if you want to call it fame or whatever you want, okay, let me tell you, it doesn't do anything for my ego. My whole story is about my boy. You can see him over my shoulder, okay, in the background. He's always with me, okay? It's all about trying to prevent future tragedies, okay? Now, if my notoriety, though, can do some good, I want to do that, okay? And I got now a lot of politicians want to talk to me. My governor, my lieutenant governor, state senators, they all want to talk to me, okay? And I've already talked to a bunch of them. But, you know, I still realize that they're being nice, okay? This guy's got a big story. He's got a little notoriety, you know?